All right, so we're about a month and a half out from UFC 306 Noche, where Sean O'Malley lost his bantamweight title to Merab Dvalishvili. And there's a couple things I wanted to go over that I feel like a lot of people aren't really considering when they're watching the fight at first. This is really just going to be kind of everything that happened before the fight, during the walkouts, the entrances, and everything, and then a little bit of the first round. Not necessarily a full fight breakdown, but regardless, this is started. When the fight was started and the walkouts began, the huge difference right off the bat was the energy in which they both walked out with. If you look at Marab, he's walking out with like high energy. First of all, he's looking around the sphere. He's screaming. His arms are up. He doesn't seem too like intimidated by the grandness of the spear. Because this is the first time they've ever fought in anywhere as big as this, with a huge screen surrounding the whole vicinity, or at least on one half side. And all the way up through when he's getting checked out by the cut man, getting into the ring, he's looking at the crowd, flexing, and he gets in. And then Sean comes out, and he looks much more like reserved and timid. He has his hood on. He's kind of just peeking around the sphere, taking it all in. He's not really reaching out toward the fans. He's not getting too much, he ain't getting too hype. He ain't getting too hype. He's just going out here. He looks a lot more serious. Like he's just I want to say anxious. I feel, but I don't want to say like necessarily nervous because he's done this plenty of times as a professional. He's a UFC champion, so I don't think the nerves necessarily are getting to him. But I do think there was a little bit of anxiety there with the whole different ring, the huge build up, all this, and the previous build up before the fight. All the media. So he's coming out and he's getting ready. He has a serious look on his face. Still, he almost looks a little like stiff at first, and you'll see once he gets in the ring the difference between them. Especially if you recall the fight. Even when he's getting in the ring, he's addressing the fans, turning towards, eyes closed, the old John Jones. Still not that much energy. He's kind of glaring around the ring, does his little basketball shuffle, and now he's shuffling around. And when he gets over here to Merab, the difference in the way they are during the fight. By the time they got face to face, Marab was already looked like he just got done with 3 rounds. He was broken a sweat. He's bouncing around the ring by the time Sean even enters. And I think that did kind of like play a factor in what Sean was thinking, because you'll see kind of during the fight he'll glance over at Marab getting really warmed up, and then he'll start warming himself up. Because I believe he came in there kind of cold. And once he seen how ready to go Marab was, he started to move around the ring, try to get loose, do his little head movement, his little basketball dribbles, bouncing around. And then Marab is just over there, ready to go, bouncing, bouncing, looking at Sean. And then, first round, or while their names are getting called, Marab's still just a bouncing. Sean's still staying kind of low heart rate, I would say. And it's harder to tell in the stills now. I did notice while watching the fight live that the octagon, the whole lighting of the octagon seemed to be like oddly dim, like really eerie setting. And Dano did mention that in an interview that they had to work really hard with getting the lights set up because of the way the sphere is set up, um, and to make it good for the cameras and to not make it, to make it look good cinematic. And now that I mention it, Tim Welch did go on, um, whose podcast did he go on? The Luke Thomas podcast, and mentioned how both him and Sean felt off on the come up of the fight and during fight day. And when asked by Luke, what went right with the game plan, because what went right, because we saw what went wrong. The only thing Tim could really say was that Sean was very physically fit. He was in shape, which is kind of a ridiculous answer because of course he should be in shape. He's a professional UFC fighter. In shape shouldn't be a problem. It should be how you're prepared to deal with the wrestling, which Marab had a great game plan to just circle and circle on the outside until, half the round was gone and then shoot in and fucking win the round by wrestle fucking Sean. But regardless, let's see what else I have in my notes. Oh yeah, Marab, the whole commotion with Tim Welch at the beginning of the first round, I feel like may have even played an extra little something on the whole anxiety of the fight for Sean, because what kind of weird thing to happen? You're going to fight, adrenaline's high, you're in the middle of it. It's the first round, first like what, 10 seconds, 12 seconds, and all of a sudden Marab's pointing behind you, looking behind you, screaming. I thought it was like I thought he was trying to set up Sean to look away at the ref and then jump in. That's why I thought Herb Dean um first even stepped in. I thought that was why. I thought he was trying to tell Marab to stop pointing at the ref as if the ref was stopping the fight when he's not. I thought that's what it was, but it turns out it's the excessive coaching. Sean does right at the first run straight at Marab, which if you've watched a lot of fights, I have seen a lot of people, especially when they do have a little bit of nerves, to get into the fight, like to get into the battle, to just run straight across to the guy and start, initiating the jab exchange. And that's, to kind of get you more into the fight, ready to go. Get you on high alert. During the fight, Sean did seem to be very flat-footed, which I don't know if that came with the nervousness, maybe the game planning, a lot that could go into maybe he was trying to set up just a power strike on Merab, which is kind of smart, but really not though. Why do you want to stay in one spot when someone's trying to get to your legs and wrestle you? I feel like you want to be moving around, really threading the knees, uppercuts, jabbing, like really moving. You wouldn't be on a bike making him have the cardio should have been there, so it shouldn't have been an issue. Moving on. um what Marab was doing when he was getting Sean up against the fence and just hanging on Sean's head and making Sean almost collapse over, putting his face on his own knees, is great to do on a tall, especially with their height difference because of how tall Sean is for the weight class and how short Marab is for the weight class. They put like just all of Marab's weight in a good position. His hips are back, weight's low, at that perfect angle on his neck to just wear on Sean. And then when later in the fight, when Merab was threatening that choke from that same position, where he just throw up his feet and sink his hips down and try to choke Sean from there, it's kind of hard to fight out of that once you're curled up so deep, against the fence in that little corner. And Merab's strong, hanging on you, squeezing on your neck, making you dedicate 2 hands to that. It's not going to go very good. That's really about it when it comes to like before the fight. We're not really getting into breaking down the whole fight, but just what might have affected the way Sean fought because he definitely didn't look like he was on that night. And I noticed while I was watching the fight. So Tim saying that on the Luke Thomas podcast, you know, confirming that definitely helps because I think in a rematch, it probably wouldn't go quite the same. I think Sean would be more, hip to just really going in and fighting more. Because when they did start, I'm not trying to get too much into breaking it down, might even make something else on that, but when they did start grappling, Sean was having some success, countering. He wasn't getting in too much danger. Marab was just doing a lot of outside passing, really just putting light pressure on him, just enough to, not get stood up, nothing like that. So I do think maybe working a full camp just on wrestling, which I'm guessing he did for the first camp, but maybe he needs a whole another 6 weeks at it. But we'll see. Hopefully he's still wrestling on it or not wrestling on it, practicing and training his wrestling since his loss to do that comeback fight. Because I don't know if Marab's going to fight Umar or who, but an O'Malley rematch seems like it would probably be something that the UFC would do, considering how much money O'Malley's bringing in for him. But we're gonna see. Um, I hope you like this little, another perspective on the fight, and hopefully we'll see these boys rematch or something, and maybe Sean can get the W back. 'Cause I know when I was watching the fight, I was very, very nervous. My heart was racing. I felt like I was the one in there fighting. But yeah, so that's all.